2026 Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting. As you have well seen, we have a very full agenda, so we'll try to keep on track, and I'm going to be moving some items around as we get on into the meeting. We'll start off with item number 1, which is approval of the minutes of the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting of April 28th of 2021. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion to approve.
A motion by Councilmember Tyser. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So we'll move into the Community Development meeting. Item number 2 is a presentation by the Planning Commission regarding the recommendation on the mixed-use development construction phasing.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to present what Planning Commission has come up with since our work session, our joint work session that we, I don't even remember when that is, but when that was. But after we had our joint work session, Planning Commission has met 3 times, essentially. We first met as a group for about an hour and a half to talk about really what we were tasked to do to sort of get some clarity and to get the general direction that we wanted to go in. That meeting was an hour and a half. We did not come anywhere close to finishing what we needed to do. But we did come up with, we took the big master list of the different jurisdictions and how they did their construction phasing. And we sort of honed in down on James City County, which is Williamsburg, Virginia. We liked how they did it. We also liked some of the language from the city of Vancouver, Washington. How they sort of gave an out. I'll talk about that in a minute. And so we came up with that in our first meeting, and then Peter Vanstrom, Ron Bevan, and I met separately to put together the bones of pretty much what you have in front of you, which is just the James City County plus the Vancouver City, and then edits that the 3 of us came up with. We took another hour and a half to do all that. It was very, very productive. It was a good meeting for the 3 of us. And then the full commission came back together and discussed some of the questions and some of the different variables that we had drafted into this. And that took another hour. And what we came up with was what I believe you have been given. I don't know if what you've been given had blue highlights in it, but what is in blue on this was in blue for what Ron, Peter, and I brought back to the Planning Commission as different areas that we felt like needed discussion. So I'm just gonna read through this, tell you a little bit about some of the decisions that we made, our trains of thought. Feel free to jump in with any questions that you have at any time. None of us were married to any of this. Won't be offended if you want to change anything, but this is what we came up with. So what we decided was that the best approach would be to have sort of a more general blurb in the UDC, which is that first paragraph that you see in front of you right now. And just for the sake of completeness, I had looked at the UDC, felt like it best belonged in 13.3.3 under the application process. Which was a little different than James City County because their equivalent of UDC is set up very differently than ours. So just in one place at 13.3.3, but then also to have some kind of teaser in each of the district intent sections, which is 4.1.2, 4.1.3, 0.4, and 5.1.2, just to sort of say, look, if you're building under this, using this district, I don't remember the word, but if your intent is to build mixed use with these districts, then you're going to need to have a construction phasing policy, C 13.3.3. That's sort of what we were thinking. And so this paragraph is what would go in 13.3.3. Construction phasing, a project build-out schedule for, and then this is the first thing that's blue that you probably can't see, NX, CX, SH, and DX. What we did carve out of the mixed use sections was residential mixed use. Because as we looked at it, of course, residential mixed use is all residential. There's no commercial, there's no office, there's no anything in there but residential. So it really we didn't feel like it fit under the construction phasing issues that we were having here in Roswell and frankly, under what you guys asked us to do. So we carved that out, but feel like it probably needs to be addressed at some point, but just didn't feel like it was as pressing as this. So that's just as an aside. So CX, NX, CX, SH, and DX, horizontal mixed-use developments. Horizontal mixed-use, I don't think that phrase appears anywhere in the UDC. That's what we came up with. I know you guys understand what we mean. Don't know that that language is a language that actually belongs in the UDC. But that's what we're talking about, not the vertical mixed use, the horizontal mixed use. So whether that's appropriate to introduce a new term into the UDC, don't know. That's for you guys to hash out. But so horizontal mixed use development shall be submitted for review by city staff in accordance with construction phasing policy adopted by mayor and city council. A couple of blue things in there. We felt like the construction phasing is not something that should be in an application to be approved by, to be recommended by planning commission and then approved by council. We felt like that was just minutia that really didn't need full council approval, meaning the actual plan for every single development. But the policy, we felt like the overall policy, which we'll get to in a minute, we felt like it's something that should be approved by mayor and council. But then has city staff just review the phasing plan for each development as it comes to them as a matter of regular course with their application. So the purpose of such phasing plan shall be to provide assurance that the development will include both the proposed non-residential and residential elements at certain project milestones and or at build out. So that's the entirety of the paragraph that we are recommending be included in the UDC. Any questions?
Councilmember Palermo.
First of all, great job. As I was reading through this in the documents ahead of time, I was really impressed. And to be fully candid, I felt you all brought us kind of even more of a great foundation than I expected, because it's obviously a long, complex discussion, but I think this was really a fantastic, important foundation that I would love to see move fast. My feedback to here is twofold. One you already addressed, which is horizontal mixed use has no meaning within our UDC, so I'd prefer to have it be something along the lines of just developments that include both residential and commercial / retail uses, something that would make sense within our UDC. So that was one update. The other one is I do agree, and I did immediately agree with the thought process behind RX and why the decision was made to leave RX out. So totally on board there. The one thing I would do is I would add more zonings than just the NX, CX, SH, and DX. And so, for example, CC is one where bottom line is if an applicant's coming in and requesting a large mixed-use development, then I think a lot of residents would be expecting to see it truly be built as mixed use and not just built for the just the residential. And so that CC is an example, and even an example, and this is where I'd want to know from staff where there's what the other zoning types are that would allow creation of mixed use. And because, for example, actually when I think to Milton had a development where what was approved was it was a townhome development that also had restaurants. And so some nearby neighborhoods were in support because they were thinking it's going to be great, they're going to be able to walk to these great restaurants. And then what ended up happening was the townhomes were built, and then they actually come back to council and say, you know what, we just feel the market's a little different, and instead of putting in those restaurants, we want to put in more townhomes. In which case, all the neighbors were up in arms because the only reason they supported it was because they wanted to see those restaurants built, and there was no requirement for those restaurants to be built in Milton. So I forget what ended up happening there, but so that's why I want to go beyond just NX, CX, DX, et cetera, because although from a zoning definition standpoint in the code, those are the official quote unquote mixed use developments, but I want to make sure, or mixed use zonings, but I want to make sure this is something that's actually covering all mixed use. So that's really my two feedback here, but again, really impressed with how far this came.
Thank you, Mayor Henry.
They could come back to you to do a change to the site plan that had been originally approved. However, if they bring in commercial, it might not be exactly the same commercial, but if they have commercial that matches or looks similar, because it is zone CH, which does allow commercial. So I think that is probably the other zoning district Councilmember Palermo was bringing up, because CH does allow multifamily. It does not allow townhomes anymore, because that was removed, but it does allow multifamily as a conditional use. So if you had a mixed-use development come through with apartments or condos in the CH, then technically that would end up being horizontal mixed use as well. So yes, they would have to come through you if they want to make changes, or if somebody wants to add additional apartments or something like that there in the future. So, but at this point in time, no, we have not seen anything for the commercial on that property. So yes, one of the conditions on there indicated that the property had to have the density for the multifamily over the entire 18 acres. So because of that, they have not subdivided the property at this point in time, and they can't.
And, Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and taking all the time to take a look at this important issue here. Couple of things. We have an example also on East Road and Holcomb Bridge on East Roswell, across the street from the Shell station. They built some homes there, brand new, expensive, promised them that there would be a little restaurant, boutique restaurant that they can walk, we can go with the strollers, and there was a beautiful concept that never happened. People invested a lot of money there on those homes that were not cheap, and this never happened. If this was out parcels, then we need to make sure that when they come to promise a nice mixed-use project, that they own everything. Because then you cannot promise something that then you don't own, or you cannot make it happen. So I think that we need to make sure that they own everything before promising council to approve, and the buyers, this is what I'm more concerned about, buyers who were, bait and switch, is to say. So we need to avoid that. And the same with the apartment that the mayor just mentioned, which I also oppose on Alpharetta Highway, that they never comply with the commercial part that was promised and approved by mayor and council. So I think that we really address these kind of issues in the city in the future. The past is the past, unfortunately, but in the future we need to address this as soon as possible so this never happen again in the city of Roswell. And again, thank you for all of you taking the time to get in deep analysis and making a proposal.
Thank you, Mayor Henry.
Yes, and to you, Allison, please be advised that we're not directing you as the Planning Commission to go back and rework this. I think what we're doing is we're giving input to staff, because this will be coming to council, so we just want to make sure that those holes are plugged.
I fully understood it. And,
Thank you.
We on the Planning Commission completely recognize that we very likely did not think of all the different contingencies and potential holes that we left out of here. I mean, we tried, but we know that there's probably more, like the whole out parcel issue. That didn't even come up. So
Thank you.
absolutely no problem. So that was only the first part, y'all. There's a whole nother second part. And that's the actual policy. So we came up with recommendations for a policy. We very much copied the idea of this from James City County, but changed a bunch of the wording. I mean, I primarily changed a lot of the wording just so it would be more logical and flow better. And we also changed, James City County couched their policy in terms of units. And we as a group didn't feel like units would be appropriate, because an apartment unit is much smaller than a townhome unit, which is smaller than a housing unit. So we used square footage when we were determining our different percentages. So we've got that similar first, the start of a construction within NXCX SH and DX horizontal mixed use, so y'all change that however you need to change it to be inclusive of out parcels and different, you could just add to that. Shall be sequenced in accordance with the project build-out schedule submitted for review as part of the initial application and approved by city staff. So that's what I was talking about earlier. That's how we envision the process to be. Project proposals that adhere to the following sequencing requirements will be considered consistent with the objectives of the phasing policy. First step, building permits for up to 20% of the residential square footage, and I will share that James City County's was 10%, and Planning Commission didn't feel like that was high enough, so we upped it to 20%. So basically, building permits for up to 20% of the residential square footage, as shown on the master plan, may be issued prior to commencing any non-residential construction. So they could build 20% of residential off the bat without doing anything with non-residential. But then in order to get building permits for the next 30% of residential, this is now number 2, they need to be issued building permits for at least 25% of the non-residential. And then step 3 was in order to receive building permits for the next 30%, so 51 to 79% of the residential square footage, they need to have been issued. Now, we weren't sure whether it was certificates of occupancy or certificates of completion, just because we weren't overly familiar with the meanings of each of those during our meeting. As we spoke a little more, we think it was more certificate of completion. We want the non-residential portions to be built out, but not necessarily ready for someone to come in and occupy it. Just, it needs to be built. It needs to be ready for someone to come in and say, we want to lease this space, which might be a certificate of completion. So they need the certificate of completion for 25% in the non-residential in order to get building permits for 51 to 79% of the residential square footage. And then finally, the final 20% of the residential square footage, building permits can't be issued until they have the certificate of completion for at least 80% of the non-residential. So that's how we've structured it for the phasing. Number 5 is the out, which is what we got from the City of Vancouver, which we liked. Any of the above mentioned requirements may be adjusted or waived by City Council and Mayor at a public hearing. So here's a little bit of a rub that we came up with when we were writing this. Since the what are we calling this? The phasing plan does not normally get to Mayor and Council. We need to figure out a way to allow Mayor and Council to waive any of these percentages, right? So what staff told us is if we just put in there that it can be waived at a public hearing, that should cover a really broad range of situations, meetings, circumstances under which you guys could waive any of the requirements, but we felt pretty strongly that they should only be allowed to waive if they provide some kind of, and right now the language is security or other form of binding assurance. I mean, basically like a bond kind of thing. We don't know that that's the correct terminology, but there needs to be some kind of financial assurance that if they want to do 80% of their residential up front and not start any of the non-residential, that the money is there, that they're going to build the non-residential. That's essentially what number 5 says. And again, the terminology might be completely and utterly wrong, but I think you guys get the flavor of what we were trying to get at. So that is our recommended phasing policy. I do want to just add that during this whole discussion of that out, the question was, well, what if they come back and want to change their master plan? What happens then? So that's, I don't know if, additional thoughts, it is there. So that last one, they were concerned with developers who changed the master plan after the initial approval, and then that throws off percentages. If you reduce the square footage for one type without an intent to reduce the other, the suggestion from Planning Commission was that the reductions need to be proportional. So if you reduce commercial by 20%, you need to reduce the residential by 20%. we didn't have very much discussion on that. That was a sort of off-the-cuff kind of thought or idea. At the very least, it was a concern. What happens with this whole phasing plan if they come back and do change the site plan, like ask to reduce commercial or ask to reduce non-residential. There was also discussion that some members felt very strongly that there should be a general discussion about incentivizing development. I think that might have come up in our joint session initially, and people still continue to feel strongly about that. And then there's that whole RX carve-out. So those were our suggestions for the actual policy. We also, the other question that came up was, well, how does policy get passed? Where is it housed? And what we were told is that there's really not that many policies right now. I think there was one, I think, that you guys could think of. So this whole idea of having a policy, I think, is relatively unique to the city. And just the process for passing the policy and implementing the policy might be a little new here. So that was another thing that came up.
As staff, we know there's resolutions that you pass and ordinances that you pass, but weren't overly sure when we were talking about policy where that fell. And so that was something that I guess we'd look at legal as to say, how does that go? And all of you, what kind of policies and everything. So we weren't sure when they were talking about it because we discuss ordinances and we discuss resolutions and everything. So that's why we weren't sure where the policy would go and where should it be housed.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. Thank you for a great presentation. Great work. I just have a question. I think this is from Mr. Petty, and I may have asked this before. Assurance bonds and bonds, are we permitted to require bonds for these type of projects and execute on them if they don't, for example, like in a Sun Valley example where they don't complete the commercial part?
I think it'd be hard to require them. I think my understanding of the proposal right now is that they would be voluntary, and I think a voluntary bond to get out of some of that other requirements would work.
So as a city, we can't make that as part of the requirements?
Like a performance bond.
A performance
require
bond.
a performance bond. I think that would probably be like impact fees. Since we're already doing impact fees, I think we would have a hard time doing that. But voluntarily allowing somebody to volunteer to do it would be fine.
Thank you.
Councilmember Palermo.
Again, obviously I'd read this in the packet and was really just impressed with the great discussion and really I think actually making great progress to be ready to move something forward. So my reactions are, one, so when I originally brought this forward, I had COs instead of building permits, and the reason, I guess my concern is, I love the way you laid it out, but my concern is a lot of the time the residential could just be in these large buildings where there's no making 20%. It's either you're making 100% or 33%. So I guess that's one concern I have with building permits. So I guess, was that something that was discussed?
So when we were discussing that, you probably can't see it, but building permits in each of these is also blue. So, the percentages are all in blue, and building permits, certificates of occupancy, that's all in blue. So that was all sort of up for discussion, but no one brought up concern with it being predicated on building permits.
Gotcha.
So there wasn't any discussion around that part of it. Everyone felt like I assume everyone felt like building permits was the appropriate sort of starting.
Because the example I'm thinking, again, what I want to make sure we never allow to happen again is with Sun Valley, where I want to say it's I think it's 3 apartment buildings. So it is. So 3 apartment buildings, if we're saying you can't get 20% until you build a certain percentage of, or you get building permits for a certain percentage of the commercial, it's impossible to have a building permit for 20% because, am I right? Or staff, you do have the ability to to do it for 20%? Because I would think it's an entire building that you're getting a building permit for.
So what this would propose is getting up to 20% of the residential square footage before you got any non-residential, and that would be it. So yes, it might be very difficult depending on the size of the building and the number of units in there. So they might have to basically start almost with the commercial in order to get that 20%. Depends on what size of building they're doing. So based on what they've proposed, it would give them 20% of the residential square footage,
Okay.
which 20% of the residential square footage might be one of the buildings. It might be one whole building out of, depending on how much residential is on the plan. It's hard to say without an actual master plan.
But that would assume that you have to have 5 buildings to be able to do 20%. If you have less than 5 buildings, you need to
Most
reach a
likely
higher
not.
threshold.
Well, I mean, the whole point is that we're trying to incentivize concurrent building of
Right.
both the residential and the non-residential. So if one building, one residential building is going to be 30% of the square footage of the residential of their whole project, then they need to go ahead and get started on the non-residential at the same time.
Excellent. So that answers that question, and that makes sense. And then also, I think it is crucial that I did see in starting in steps 3, where you do have the CO, because my concern would be that they get a building permit for the commercial, but then they don't end up actually building what they got the building permit for. But I feel that's protected by the fact that you do have the CO steps. And so really like that you took that into account. And then I would have preferred starting lower with 10% like it was in there instead of 20%, but I'm willing to compromise on that because, again, I do think you have something great here. And I just had a comment to the next. Can we go to the next slide, please? And also, my preference would have actually been in units. That way, giving kind of the developer a little more decision-making ability for if they want to actually start with the townhomes, whereas, and I'm concerned, this would be a disincentive for them to want to actually build the townhome or finish up the townhome first. So that's where I probably would have preferred units. But again, I think this is so great. I'm certainly willing to compromise and certainly can be supportive of square footage instead of units. And then I think for number 5, kind of my thought process is going back to staff's comment that as long as it says something along the lines of a public hearing, then I think I'm pretty comfortable with that being a public discussion and a public vote. So yeah, just again, really impressive work, making great progress to bring this to be a reality. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Tyser and then Councilmember Judy.
Yeah,
and
just
then
one thought I had. It's going to seem like it's on that same line, but it's really not. On the percentages, one of the concerns I'd have is it's 20.0001%, all right, and that causes a weird process to occur. So my thought might be to give staff just a little bit of wiggle room in there with maybe the word approximately in those areas. I just don't know how the geometry and math might work out. That's different than what you were just talking about, Councilman Palermo, but just something to think about because you don't want to be arguing about, 10 feet and then have something suboptimal happen.
Councilmember Judy.
I was just going to say, I think in today's world, when you have the concurrent building, which is what y'all were trying to get at, once somebody starts building something, the cost of materials and everything's so great that they're not going to stop. So I think once we get moving on and they currently start building, I think we're going to be in a much better shape than we were looking at, I wasn't on council when Sun Valley was passed, but Sun Valley, you drive by there every day and you just say, if they had started building in that field there'd be something there right now. And so I think this is well on its way to being really good to put in code, and appreciate it.
Councilmember Wilsey.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the work that you all did, Allison. I appreciate all the work that every planning commission put into this and the example that you brought forward. I think we do have a lot of examples in the city where it would have been wonderful to have something like this in place. And I think going forward, we're in a much better place. Question that I have is when you're looking at the building percentages, how is things like infrastructure, like the road, the streets, and green space and things like that calculated into the completion of the project? Did those things need to go in first prior to the building construction, or how is that phased in?
Okay, well, we'll use Sun Valley since everyone's been bringing that up. And since they had different roads in there. So if you look at where those multifamily buildings are sitting, you have to have a road to get in there to get to that part. So, and they are required to complete the sections related to parking for that. The landscaping portion related to that percentage would have to go in. So that would be part of the land disturbance permit section, and what they'd have to complete in order to get their COs for the building. The trees related to the portion of that section would have to be planted and in, and depending on the time of year, could be bonded to be planted during the cooler season portion if they finish in July for some reason. But yes, those would have to be included and part of the project.
So they're included with the percentage that's actually being built at that time. They don't have to complete the infrastructure or stormwater for the entire development first? No. Okay.
They would have to, I think I'm correct on that.
They would be obligated to construct any of the infrastructure required for the overall development. So for example, if the stormwater systems for the entire
Right,
development, they can't just build part of it.
Right.
It may be constructed in phases
Right.
because of just the way the implementation is, but they would be required to have everything that's required for that development in, or if it's a phase, and if they came in, it's large enough that it's multiple phases and that can be
phases.
wholly contained in itself,
Right.
then that would be different. But for the overall, they would be required to have that in order to get the COs for the first CO. We wouldn't let anything open without having that infrastructure in
Okay.
place.
That's what I just wanted to make sure that that foundation, that base was completed before actual construction began for the project. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. So it's a good step forward to protect the best interest of the community. So I'm glad to see these phases on percentage. So I have a question on this page. What's the difference from the non-residential between 2 and 3 from the non-residential component? What's the difference between 2 and 3?
Building permits versus certificate of completion.
Okay. So,
Number 2, they just have to have the permits. But number 3, basically, that 25% needs to be complete.
okay, great, thank you. So then, my next question will be on number 5. And I don't know if this is also related to require performance bond, like Councilmember Hall just mentioned, and was not clear for me on the answer from the legal department if it's legal or illegal to require performance bond for the non-residential portion of the development.
To require it we can't require it. We can let them volunteer to do it if they wanted
It
to.
would be illegal to require.
Yes.
Okay.
But this isn't, are you saying that number 5, it's not requiring them, right? This is
Right.
them.
I mean, what I understand is if they want to, the way you presented it is if they want to offer a performance bond and get some of this other stuff waived, they're volunteering to do it. And that's my understanding of what you're proposing.
Yeah,
Is that-
it is.
And then number 5 also will contemplate kind of like a escrow account. Again, if it's legal or illegal to require or voluntarily, voluntarily is legal, I'm sure, but it's like an escrow account for the non-residential aspect of the project.
I would have to look into that more, but I don't believe that that's legal.
Okay. So yeah, that's all my questions, thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other comments? All right, there's a lot of good information. Thank you very much for the
All right, thank
presentation,
you.
Allison. We appreciate it. Thank you all. We're going to move to item number 3, the update and presentation of the 2040 Comprehensive Plan. Jackie? it's not off your computer.
Good morning. So there will be a few different slides in here than the one that's in their packet. I made some changes due to some comments I received at the end of last week. And I've been moving it around late yesterday and first thing this morning. So I wanted to start out with first, this is the current comprehensive plan that we have on file today. So, and the comp plan that we have presenting to you tonight is very similar to what we have. But I wanted to let you know that it is what we use, and so there are differences and everything and some new things. So I'm going to go through this. This is coming to your council meeting on June 14th, but I wanted just to go through and give you some updates related to this, and this is discussion item only, just so give you guys an understanding of what's coming to you in a few weeks. So this is, as stated, required by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs every 5 years. This is the 10-year update. With every 5 years, we do a 5-year update as well. This allows us to retain our qualified local government status and the Plan First status, which a few of you know that we just sent in that renewal application, and we hope to hear in the fall. But our qualified local government status, that allows us to collect impact fees, receive grants. There's a slew of information that relates to being a qualified local government. This allows us also to continue to exceed our minimum planning standards set by the state and to refine our vision for future community and everything for the city. These are the main elements within the plan: economic development, transportation, housing, community facilities, broadband, land use, and recreation and green space. What we did this year. So the research started first, and what they do is the consultant goes through and reviews the old plans and other plans that they have from other departments. So they gather input from all the different plans around from the city. Then they took a look at the vision. We have the development phase, the document phase, and then the adoption phase. So currently, at this point in time, we are with our draft plan, so we're going through the document phase. This, as you all know, was a different year for everybody. So when we had our first public hearing meeting, which was on March 9th of 2020, it was the only meeting we had in person until Planning Commission this month, May. So all the other stuff has been virtual. So we started out in July of last summer with the first interactive public engagement, and we had over 2,700 MAP comments. It's the most we've ever had. So in all the years that I've worked on the comp plan, we've had more people comment with feedback due to the virtual. So I think in the future, people might try to do some where they do a combined. I don't know for sure, but that is a possibility. We had a lot of comments and feedback this year. They also had a map where they showed the change and preserve. So these are just different engagements. That was the first public engagement that we had throughout the summer. Then we had some upcoming workshops that were done in the fall related to the sub areas that you had asked us to look at, 3 different sections of the city. So what they've done is they collected the community input, we've developed the vision, and then they developed concepts, and those concepts are in the comprehensive draft plan. So as stated, we had the interactive map, which was one of the public engagement items. So, and these are just some phrases that people have pulled out that were on the public engagement section, which was hosted by our consultant, Pond. These are the 3 sub-areas that are in the draft comprehensive plan that was part of the community engagement, and this one happened in October and the first part of November for small groups, and then the community discussed it in their the month of December during their public engagement process as well. These are some different things that were discussed with the stakeholder committee as well, and then the public also. Should there be changes to the map? And so the map is called the Future Development Map, but it could also be called a character area map. So the key recommendations and themes. So this is what we are looking for the future. So we have new groupings and different character areas that have been discussed, not only by the stakeholder committee at length, but also again by the public engagement process that we held during the month of March and into April of this year. So the major changes that we have, so in our old comp plan, which I held up in front of you, most of the future development map is blue. There are corridors and nodes, but if you look at the map, most of it is blue. So the biggest change that you're going to see in the comp plan that's proposed is changes to the blue. We also have added a neighborhood node section or neighborhood serving section under the activity and employment. So we have these 4 different classifications: established residential areas, activity and employment areas, commercial corridors, and then conservation and green space. So these are the proposed residential categories, and for each character area, there are zoning categories that are listed as compatible in the character area. So the zoning map and the character area development map are 2 different maps. The one relates to the comp plan, and the other one is our current zoning that's on the ground. This is the proposed draft future development map or character area map. As you can see, there's different established residential areas, activity, employment, commercial corridors, and then the conservation. This is the biggest change. In the current future development map, all of the blue is the same, and it's all suburban residential and some estate. But with this one, we have estate, suburban, neighborhood residential, and active neighborhoods. This was discussed at length by the stakeholder committee at several meetings, beginning portions of this year, and then again by the community. And I'm going to show you what I mean here. So look at the suburban residential. These are the suburban residential character areas that are proposed for the city. You'll take a look at that. There's a lot of the area east and west of 400. Compatible future zoning that they're proposing in here is AG 43, RS 87, RS 30, RS 18, the PRD, civic, recreation, and conservation. So what this means is if a person wants to go through and do a rezoning application to say RS 12 or RS 9, and they're looking at a property that's in a character area in the suburban residential, well, staff can straight out say it does not comply with the comprehensive plan. Straight out tell them. Now, if the applicant still chooses to bring a rezoning through, that is their opportunity. But they'll know ahead of time that staff looks at this and says it doesn't comply with the comprehensive plan. Staff is going to make a recommendation for denial due to the fact that it does not comply. So this makes a stronger case, and let me make sure I'm correct with legal. It makes a stronger case for the council if the zoning that's compatible is not in there. So if you make if you deny a zoning because it's not compatible with the comprehensive plan, it's a stronger case. I just wanted to make sure you understand that this is the biggest change that we have in here. They wanted to make the suburban areas stronger. So each different of the 4 categories, you have estate, suburban, neighborhood, and active. So the active areas, they have RS 12 and RS 9. So there's only a few areas in the city. So what you'll see is if somebody wants to bring something in and it's not compatible, staff is going to let them know straight out in the beginning that if you choose to do this, understand this is what you're dealing with. So some people might say, all right, well, there's no point in bringing it in, or they might try anyway. And if council feels that, hey, this is zoned RS 12 and there's an RS 12 next door, maybe we'll still allow it, and you have that opportunity. So I wanted to let you know that this is going to be your biggest thing that you're going to see different compared to the comp plan we have today and what was proposed for the future. Here's another example. This is the major activity character area. And so as you can see, this is the Georgia 400 node area. Well, the compatible future zoning they're showing is CX, CC, CH, OR, OPIX, Civic, RS6, RS4, RM3, and RX. Now, you'll see those are a couple of dots on top of that. As you can see, this is my draft plan, and I have made numerous comments in here. And those are some of them that I felt, well, we don't have any of that zoning down there. We don't have industrial flex there, and we don't have commercial heavy. So what we're gonna make for you is recommendations when we bring it to the council meeting on the 14th, staff's recommendations, and then at council, you will make the recommendation to, if you feel that this zoning should stay in here, or no, this should be removed, because it doesn't really fall into what we want to see in the node area. And I will want to make sure you understand that all of the zonings that we have in our Unified Development Code have to be in some character area in the comprehensive plan. I believe I am correct on that, legal. Making sure that every category is at least listed in at least one character area. Here's another one, just an example. This is the industrial area. You can see compatible zoning that they're looking at is office residential, office park, industrial flex, industrial light, civic, recreation, or conservation. This is the nodal areas that they're proposing. This is the major activity area. The neighborhood serving areas, that is also the other new item that we have a little bit different. In the 2035 update, they created a couple of neighborhood nodes. This one is expanding it a little. Now, some of these on here may or may not really fit, but this is something that we'll also discuss with you as to whether you feel that these should be a neighborhood node or should they be something different. We have the Arnold Mill area, we have Rucker Road, we have a little bit up at Crabapple, we have a middle area there on Highway 92. At Woodstock, we have the area down here on Marietta Highway that has commercial there. They have a few places on Holcomb Bridge Road east of 400 that they're looking at as neighborhood nodes. And what that they're showing for compatible zoning there, NX, OP, civic, recreation, and conservation. So it is a little bit different. So if you take a look at that map, that one on east of 400, I believe, is currently zone CX. And we do have some different zoning. So if somebody brought something in and wanted to rezone something, if this is what stays, then it might be a change. So I just wanted to let you know that too. So these are the biggest changes that we have technically in the map. This is the commercial corridor section. They had a typo in there, the Parkway Village. As you can see, I've crossed that out for it should say Parkway Village and not industrial flex. Also in the draft plan, of course, is the community short-term work program and the CIE capital improvements element that we are required to send to the state every year. So this is our 5-year program that is all the different projects that the different departments have over the 5 years that we put in here. This allows them to show what we use for impact fees and also the short-term work programs that all the different departments have on the books. One other item that is in here that I don't have on the presentation that's in the draft, every 5 years we have to do a report of accomplishments. So, and it's based on the one from 2015, 2016. So in here, I had to take the short-term work program that was adopted 5 years ago and go through that and indicate what's been completed, what's still underway, if something was dropped or postponed. If something was dropped or postponed, we had to explain why. But for the most part, when I went through, I didn't see any that had been done that way, and if so, I have it listed. But most all of our items, a lot of them have been completed, and some of them are still underway. So that is a requirement that we do every 5 years. Next steps. As you know, we'll be bringing this to you for the transmittal to the state on June 14th. So what's going to happen is you'll go through it, read through your draft document that you all received in the packet, and bring your comments to the meeting, or if you want to send them to staff in advance, that would be fine. You can email us your comments. We've received from our stakeholder committee, at Planning Commission, there was nobody that came. So the Planning Commission has made a recommendation to approve the document and move it forward. No one from the public came. Now, we did receive a comment from one of our committee members just last night with a couple of comments. So we'll be bringing that forward as well so that you know and we can make sure everything meets the requirements. So if you could read through the document and take a look. Staff has read through it, and as you can see, I've made some comments related to some of the proposed areas for compatibility future zoning. So if you feel one of the zoning classifications should not go in a character area, this is the time to tell us now. Once it's transmitted to the state, they will have time to review it. They can take up to 4 months. Normally they do not. I've seen them take around 45 to 60 days. Sometimes it's as low as 30, but normally they're going to take probably about 45 to 60 days. Once we get it back, with any luck, they'll say it's approved. And as soon as it's approved, we will place it on an agenda for adoption. It must be adopted by October 31st of this year in order for us to stay in compliance with our certified local government status. If they send it back and they have comments, then at that time we will be making changes in the document to send back to them, for them to re-review and then get it back to us, and then for us to get it to you. That is the process. Do you have any questions?
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So I have two questions. One is if we can go back to the suburban residential. Obviously, that's always been a big focus over the years. And so even though it looks smaller, it's that in reality, it's because there's more residential types of districts. And so I guess my question is, I'm wondering about two zonings, if there was any discussion on it. One is PRD. So I'm a little surprised to see PRD given just the focus on the more expansion, where I would certainly see PRD in some of the other residential types, but I would have figured certainly not in estate residential and maybe not in suburban residential either, given the fact that it does have the higher densities. So that's one comment I have, which I'm curious about. And then the other one is civic. So I think there's a lot of different character areas that are a great fit for civic, and then also wondering if, just given many of the different rezonings that we've seen over the last 5 years and even prior to my being on council, I've seen where there's a lot of question of, are there certain parts of suburban residential where civic doesn't really blend in as much with all the residential area? I'm just curious if that came up for discussion at all.
So interesting enough, neither one of those were discussed by the stakeholder committee. They did discuss the zoning classifications itself, the 30, the 87, the 18, the 12s. They never really talked about PRD, but if that is something you feel needs to be changed in a couple, that is a recommendation that council can have. And if you feel that civic, since it's in, I believe, almost every classification, if you feel that it should be removed out of something, that once again is something that council can make a recommendation for and take a look at. So if you will go through and take a look at all the different sections, so the portion in the document, which is what we're calling Roswell Tomorrow, is all these different sections.
Okay.
So so the first section's like the background, we have the policies. Some of the policies, most of them stay the same. We do have some new policies in there. They're very general, and they're not overly specific, so so if you could take a look at that. But Roswell Tomorrow is the section that has all of this.
Okay.
So if you could take a look and make sure. One of the comments that we did actually receive from the stakeholder member was RS18. She thought that we didn't talk about that, put it in here, but I'm actually having one of our admin go through, because it was discussed at length in February and in March with the stakeholder committee, and I know we talked about 18 for this area, so we'll have that information and for to be in front of you by the June council meeting to make sure that 18 should fit, or if you feel that 18 should come out, that's once again a recommendation.
Okay, and then my other question, so that was suburban residential. My other question is, Parkway Village is an area where there's been a lot of, just really great protections put in place, so much to the case that we've actually copied some of the things in Parkway Village and moved it to other parts of the city, because we've seen it was really done really successfully. And are there changes to the Parkway Village and the protections that exist there through this?
Yes, hold on a second. So I didn't actually print that one out up here, but Parkway Village, they're showing compatible zoning to be RS9, RS6, RS4, RCC, RTH, Parkway Village, Civic, Recreation, and Conservation. So, because currently, I believe RS, let me see what we have in our current code. Let's see here. So why I brought this one, just in case. So under the Parkway Village section currently, here we go. Parkway Village is next page. Parkway Village. Currently in Parkway Village, we have RS9, RS6, RS4, RCC, RTH, Parkway Village, Civic, Recreation, and Conservation. So there's no change from the current one to the proposed one for Parkway Village.
And I just realized too, what I was actually thinking of, I think is less related to the comp plan and more to the zoning code, because I was thinking of actually buffers in PV, and that's something that this is not, is this changing or impacting in any way?
No,
Okay.
that, the zoning and the comp plan are two separate documents, and so you think of this as high level.
Yep.
This is what the vision is, and this is, so if somebody brings in a rezoning for Parkway Village, that's totally different than what this is.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think you had a question.
Councilmember Zapata, and then
Thank
Councilmember
you.
Tyson.
So, couple of questions, just to understand the maybe your slide number 5, I believe, was the interactive map comments and votes.
I don't have any.
Where is it? Comments and votes.
One?
Yes, perfect, thanks. So just to understand this data and the source, was any filter to avoid, double comments, and that there will be exclusively open for Roswell residents comments? There was some way to make sure that all these comments, the 2,728, came from exclusively Roswell residents or taxpayers?
All right, I'll have to check with the with the consultant on that. It was hosted on a social pinpoint site. So depending on who was looking at it is possible, I don't know. But we can check with the consultant and get more feedback for you for the meeting on June 14th related to that, as to was it filtered in order to determine if somebody made 25 comments or did, and it's possible that we might not be able to determine that. If somebody was able to make 25 comments, they might have been. So I'll check with the consultant on that.
And which percentage, if it's 100% of these 2,728 came from Roswell residents and taxpayers, or people from outside Roswell making comments in here, will be good to know to understand this data.
Okay.
So my second, so it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I guess 8, slide forward to this one. Perfect, yes. So, I don't know, it's just a little detail on the town center. I see on the right side, a very tall building. I don't know if they meant to put it on the other side of the line or is on this side, but it's unproportional higher compared with the rest of the town center buildings. So I don't know, just want to make sure that.
We can check with the consultant, but what they've kind of, one of the things that we, that was asked of us in this one was to take a look at the area. So the consultant had Urban 3, was part of the team, and they did a look at the area here, and it's to take a look at what we have. So I'll have the consultant give a better understanding of this for the meeting to kind of show urban and then a center and the suburban. It's just kind of trying to show you a flow of, maybe like the ex-urban is more of like, your estate level property. And then you're going into a little bit more density with suburban, but minimal. And then you're going into more the town center, which you're gonna think of most likely is more of your downtown area, somewhat. And then you're gonna go into the urban where it is like the main downtown. So we technically don't see a lot of that urban center with all that right here in this area, but, you know, they were trying to show the progression. But I
Great.
can have them give you a better description at the
Great,
June
thanks.
meeting.
And my last question, kind of piggyback on Councilmember Palermo comments about the Parkway Village. Very successful elements in there. How many of those elements could be or were translated into the other side of Holcomb Bridge? Because, they're very successful elements there. So any elements were translated into the rest of Holcomb Bridge?
So, under the Holcomb Bridge section, they try to, I'll read you the vision that's proposed, which is in your area, which is in your draft. The Holcomb Bridge section's on page 181 of the comprehensive plan. So they're talking about that the area should be regulated by an overlay district, which will protect the established single-family neighborhoods to the north and south of the corridor. The overlay will include signage or similar element that is also found in the Parkway Village character area portion of the corridor. The corridor will be traversed by multi-use trails which connect Big Creek Park, the Chattahoochee River, and the adjacent single family. The development along the corridor will be a mix of uses to allow for residential to integrate with retail and commercial. A gateway will be established at the eastern end of the character area to create a sense of arrival. So that's what they propose for the vision. Now understand, the vision is 20 years. So this is the 2040 comp plan. So it could happen 2 years from now, it could happen 18 years from now. But that is what they're looking at. Now, some compatible zoning that they've indicated in here. As staff, I've made a comment on a couple of them because we don't have CH zoning or IX zoning in this area. So my recommendation is to remove that, to keep the CX and the CC, the office residential, the office park, the neighborhood mixed use, the residential townhouse, and the RM2 zoning. Most of all those zonings already exist in the Holcomb Bridge corridor.
So, for example, elements like setbacks and
Yeah.
facing the back of the building or the size of the
None of
building?
that's in here. So that's not part of this. That's the Unified Development Code. So this is the vision,
Okay.
okay?
Councilmember Tyser.
Just to clarify, if the lot across the street from someone's home or the property is zoned a certain way, this doesn't change the way it's currently zoned. This just changes the way it could possibly be zoned in the future if someone changed it. Is that correct?
Correct. So right now, this doesn't change any zoning. That's not what this does. So in the future, if you have a character area, so go back to the map, that, one of them is the established, let's use the active neighborhoods, which is the darker, it's almost like a black on the screen. And we'll use Marietta Highway, okay? So on Marietta Highway, you have some zoning classifications that might not be RS9 today or RS12 today. But if that's approved as an active neighborhood area and RS12 and RS9 are compatible, somebody could come in the future, after this is adopted, and say, I would like to rezone this property to RS12. It would be compatible with the zoning, and so staff at that point would most likely make a recommendation for approval. However, if somebody came in and said, I want to zone this to RS18, well, RS18 is not technically allowed as an active neighborhood. Staff would have to inform that it's not compatible with the zoning. Now, that does not mean council couldn't say, we want to zone it to RS18 because you could. But as staff, we would indicate it doesn't comply. So does that help?
Any other comments or questions for Jackie on the comp plan for 2040? All right, you'll see it again at the committee meeting coming up in the very near future.
So you'll see this on June 14th.
I mean, the council meeting.
At the mayor and council meeting.
Yes.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you.
The next item, item number 4, is the consideration of an initiation for a text amendment to the Unified Development Code. And I'll turn that over to Lenore.
And I know we have a very full agenda, and the transportation has a number of items that are critical to get done before 10 o'clock today. I was going to see if you would be willing to defer discussing this item to the next committee meeting. We can do it at your direction. I know we have a very full conversation about this and do the expansion of the things that you've asked staff to look at. I think this might take us a while to get through. I'm happy to go on with the presentation, but wanted to give that opportunity to you to make a decision if you want to move this to another meeting.
I'd like
The
to move,
recommendation for deferral, is there a motion to defer to the next?
motion to
ComDev
defer
meeting?
to the next committee meeting.
Motion from Councilmember Palermo, second from Councilmember Zapata. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous, so we'll bring this back to the next ComDev. Thank you, Lenore. So we'll move over to the transportation section. I am going to jump around in this. There's some items that we have to get done today. There's some that can be moved to some other meetings if we run out of time. Item number 6 is consideration to sign a non-reimbursable right-of-way acquisition contract with the Georgia Department of Transportation for the Chattahoochee Pedestrian Bridge project. I will turn that over to Mr. Del Ross.
Good morning, everyone. I will try to move quick, as we just said. A lot of items to get through, hopefully before 10 o'clock. Item number 6, this is a standard right-of-way contract that the city is being asked to sign with the state DOT on the Chat Bridge project. So this has been under design for many years. The good news recently is that our environmental document, as required by the feds, was approved several weeks ago. That allows staff working with state DOT, working with Sandy Springs to process this right-of-way contract. I will share with you a couple of details quickly. This is a rendering of the project that was shared with the public approximately 6 months ago during our last session of public outreach. One parcel is being impacted. That parcel is in Sandy Springs. Based on our IGA with Sandy Springs, their staff and their council is responsible to acquire this right-of-way. I will show you the parcel in a second. Right-of-way to be acquired is 740 square feet. The contract is required to be completed by us since we are the sponsor of the project. We are managing it on GDOT's books. We are the sponsor, and we will be letting the project to construction next year. The parcel shown being impacted is the southeast corner of State Route 9. North is up. The river is the city limit. The parcel shown in yellow is the parcel that is being impacted by the project. Staff recommends approval. We would like to put it on the June 14th mayor and council meeting. This is a little time sensitive. We are trying to get this contract in place approved by GDOT by the end of June so that Sandy Springs may begin acquisition as quickly as possible. We would intend to be under construction on this next year.
Any question, Councilmember Tyser?
Just a quick question, Mr. Del Ross. The parcel being affected on the other side is not the whole parcel that needs to be acquired. I think it's just a small portion of it.
Correct. Right-of-way to be acquired is 740 square feet of that parcel.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Mr. Del Ross? Councilmember Zapata.
Thanks. So on this slide that you're showing here, the parcel that we're talking about is the one in yellow?
Correct.
And that is in Sandy Spring?
Correct.
And Roswell will pay and acquire?
The contract is required to be completed by Roswell since we are the sponsor on GDOT's books. Per our IGA with Sandy Springs is responsible to actually acquire the right-of-way and pay 100% of that cost.
So, but we acquire and then they pay back? Or how is the process here? Because it's a piece of land in another city.
So let me take a step back forward.
Sure.
The agreement, the IGA between Roswell and Sandy Springs for this project, design is approximately 80% funded by federal funds with the remainder split 50-50 between the two cities. Right-of-way is 100% responsible of the city the right-of-way is located in. So we have no right-of-way cost for this project at all. Sandy Springs is responsible for acquisition of this one parcel at whatever costs that may be. Construction is, again, largely federal funded, approximately 80%, with the remainder being split 50-50 across the two cities.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. The owner of this property, I think, has some history. This is the property that's owned by the former Shoot the Hooch owner, is that correct?
That's
Bill
correct.
O'Dray?
Yes.
Has he come to an agreement with Sandy Springs or with anybody on his property on?
So Sandy Springs has
this-
shown him the impacts several times over the years, but negotiations haven't started. That's the reason we're bringing the contract to you today. Approving this contract will allow GDOT to authorize the right-of-way phase and will allow Sandy Springs to begin formal negotiations to ultimately agree on a price.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion to?
Motion to approve.
Sign. I have a motion by Councilmember Tyser. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Judy to approve signing of the right-of-way acquisition contract. All in favor, raise your hand. And that is Councilmember Zapata, Tyser, Mayor Henry, Councilmember Wilsey, Councilmember Palermo, and Councilmember Judy, all opposed. Councilmember Hall. So that passes. Next item on the agenda, we're moving over to item number 10. Item number 10 is consideration of a T-Splost renewal project list. Director Roth will be making a presentation, and our goal this time will be much like at the work session for him to complete the presentation. And then after we do that, we'll open up for any comments or recommendations at that time. So I'll turn it over to Director Ralph.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, Mayor and Council. So this is the T-Splost renewal project list item. So we've been working on this draft project list for a few committee meetings and at least one work session. So if you remember, our initial list had about 70 projects on it, and the progress we made at the committee meetings and the work session a couple of weeks ago, which was good progress. So we are down to 19 projects now. So we shared those 19 projects list with their description and the cost with the public for about 5 days last week up until Sunday night. And we received 332 responses to that survey. And we also conducted 2 live virtual public conversations during that time, so public could ask us questions. So they got answers to their questions at those 2 sessions. We had a total of 21 attendees at both of those sessions. So again, you know, the goal for today is now to finalize the financially constrained project list. So it could get voted on by the mayor and city council on June 14th. And again, you know, like I said, we made good progress at the work session. So we are almost there, but not quite. So this is the response we got from the public on the 19 projects. So you see the green is the positive comments about a specific project and red is the negative. So with the, I guess with the quick look at the bar chart, you could see, you know, the 2 Pine Grove projects and the Riverside Corridor, the 2 Cox Road intersection projects, you know, they got ranked high by the public, but you can see the responses to rest of the projects. And then, so where we are as far as the total goes, so again, like I said, we had 19 projects on the list that the public saw. One of them, the Holcomb Bridge Road medians is getting taken off because of the budget decision you made on Monday night. So we have 18 projects remaining, and the total estimated cost of those 18 projects is $74.1 million. And you add the program management and staffing to deliver the program, that gives you the total of $79.1 million. And the tier 1 revenue, the tier 1 estimated revenue is $73.3 million. So we need to cut about $5.8 million worth of projects. Hopefully we could do that today. So again, this is the same list of the 19 projects, and like I just mentioned, the Holcomb Bridge medians could come off of this list. Now, you also see to the left, you see the column that shows the straw poll exercise we did at the work session a couple weeks ago. there you see one that we couldn't get to because of time on this list, and there's actually a second page to that. So there's a couple more, 4 more, that we couldn't get to at the work session. But I'm actually not sure if we need to finish that straw poll exercise, because like I said, we are almost there. And we had a conversation with the Transportation Liaison, Councilmember Tizer, and he has a suggestion for your consideration. So I would suggest if Councilmember Tizer could suggest his idea.
Okay, is this the time you want to do this now? We can make a recommendation on this list and then move forward from there. So Councilmember Tyser.
Thank you. So I'd like to thank staff for their time yesterday, and mostly thank my fellow council members, the mayor, and Councilmember Palermo, who helped work on this yesterday with me. And this can be a real example of how, as a council, we can come together and make decisions that really affect the long term of our community. Just to recap quickly, T-Splosh 2 is expected across all of Fulton County to the target collection they're expecting is about $546 million. Our share by population is about $86 million. The policy, the law, the process says that 15% of that, 85% of that $86 million is for Tier 1 projects. The remaining 15% is for Tier 2 projects. And in the event that collection goes above the $546 million, you plan for 15% in a Tier 3. So that's how that process works. And so, as Mohammed said in a prior slide, we have $79 million currently on our Tier 1 temporary list, which meant we need to move $5.8 million either to not do those projects or move them to Tier 2 or Tier 3. And so the recommendation yesterday, with one small change, would be to accept the list that we have here, moving the Hog Wallow or similar Creekway project, depending on which one, but the amount of $2.450 million to Tier 2, and taking and this is the minor change from yesterday, taking the Jones Road Bridge replacement and moving it to Tier 3. Okay, that happens to be the bridge that's in the best condition. There's chances for funding from other places, and so putting that in Tier 3 is probably a good place to put it. And so that would then make some changes to the Tier 2 and Tier 3 categories, which we don't have to, I guess, come up with other than in big categories. I can read that to you if you'd like. For the record, Tier 2, which should be $13 million, would be made up of bike ped master plan / Creekway implementation of approximately, thank you very much, $3.877 million. The bridge replacement drops now down to Tier 3, and an equivalent amount, $3.5 million, of the intersection improvements moves up to Tier 2. And that would be my recommendation. And again, I thank everybody for participation yesterday. I think we've really come up with a nice list that balances both sides of 400 and north and south, and does a great job of helping us implement both needed transportation requirements, but also gets us a long way on bike ped master plan.
Thank you, Councilmember Tyser. Is there any comments to that recommendation, Councilmember Hall?
I just have a question for Director Ralph. Could you give us a high-level timeline of implementation on any of these, assuming this all moves forward, how the implementation will work and timeline?
So that is something we'll be working on going forward. We are obviously not going to wait for the vote to pass. We're going to prepare for that, and we can, review the estimated tentative schedule at a committee meeting with you guys. Of course, we can't just start working on all 16 projects on day one. We'll just have to somehow prioritize. It's going to take a lot of work, and, with that program management and staffing, we'll use that as necessary and do our best to make as much progress as quickly as possible.
So the way they're listed here, alphabetically, A through T, that's not necessarily the order that they would be started.
Yeah, this was just a way to identify the project. Remember, we were using numbers before when we had the full big list, and now when we had the reduced list, we just wanted to use something different. So they're in no order of priority here.
Thank you.
Mayor Henry, and then Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. One of the things I'm not sure if Councilmember Hall was alluding to is we have caught some flack because people aren't seeing our T+1 projects moving forward, but they are seeing it in other communities moving forward. So could you please just give us an overview? I know that one of the issues in T+1 that we have had, it's not an issue, but we have very, very large projects. They're not the minor projects, and they're much larger than many of the ones that we're recommending in T+2. So am I correct in that because of the choice of projects we had in T+1, even though we are working on them, they are moving forward, people are not seeing bulldozers on the ground? So could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, Mayor, absolutely. So yes, having one very large project, matters. It's just still a lot of work being done on that project. But I am really glad, Mayor, you asked the question, because the 2 virtual sessions I mentioned with the public we conducted last week, I actually just went over all the T-SPLOS projects. It didn't take long, so I'm going to do that again. And having a meeting with Fulton County and all 13 cities not too long ago within the last month, at least we can compare ourselves to the North Fulton cities. We have actually done better. We are moving forward with all T+1 projects in the city of Roswell. Not every city is able to do that. So I'll just quickly go over, starting with the Big Creek Parkway project, phase 1. Now that's under construction, utility work is being done. Big Creek Parkway Phase 2, that's the connector road and the bridge over 400. So we've been working on that. That should start construction within the next 12 months. We're gonna start the procurement on that for a design build team later this year in fall, hopefully. So we are getting close. State Road 9 and Oxbow, yeah, it's tough time. Project was on hold, but as of today, as of Monday night, that's now moving forward. We are already talking to the contractor to restart the project construction. The Rucker Road project, that's 100% done. We had the old Holcomb Bridge Road bridge replacement project that actually became part of the Big Creek Parkway project realignment, so that's gonna get done as part of the Big Creek Parkway Phase 2. Historic Gateway, the $3 million we had for the aesthetics and some other elements. So the council, initiated that Citizens Advisory Committee, and they've been making great progress. We've had 3 or 4 meetings so far, so they've been working. We had some money for the Holcomb Bridge interchange, so the city made a deal with GDOT to get that whole interchange replaced as part of the Express Lanes project. So if you look at it from a high level, we have made great progress on the T-SPLOS 1 projects. I'm really proud of it, especially comparing it with the other cities in North Fulton. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the news that's not getting out. There is a lot of misinformation. I don't even know if I would call it information, but there is something that is floating around out there. So I would encourage the city to get that information out. because for some reason, people equate orange barrels with progress. And in our case, building a major bridge over 400, you're not going to see orange barrels today.
Yeah, it's gonna be a few years, but it'll get there. So that's actually a good idea. We'll do that. We were just having some conversations with the council member Hall, actually. I think she made that a similar suggestion as well for her information. So we'll work that. We'll push something out to the public.
Councilmember Zapata.
If you have a follow-up question, I can yield it.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So a couple of questions. Well, yeah, definitely estimated time of completion is crucial because people then, they know what to expect before voting on that. If it's going to take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years to complete a project, it's better to disclose this in advance. So people know the expectation, and when they're going to vote for yes or for no, they know what to expect and when to expect, not only in terms of the cost of the project, but also in the time to completion. If this project from T1, from T+1 will take 20 years, tell in advance, and then let people decide what they want to do. But if not, we might have all different expectations in terms of completion and benefits for the community of these projects. So I think this is crucial to disclose in advance. Number two question, are the $5 million be allocated to T+1 projects contingency that was mentioned in the past, in the presentation of the past, had been eliminating from this proposal, or is still there to finance $5 million from T+2 for T+1?
Yes, absolutely. Those are good questions. So you see number H here, the third from the bottom. So we were calling it T+1 contingency, but based on the discussion at the work session a couple weeks ago, now we are calling it the Big Creek Parkway Phase 2 Warsaw connection, because that's what that contingency for. So we said, let's just call it what it is. Calling it T+1 contingency just gave you some flexibility. But as we heard at the work session, you wanted it to be specific, so that's the name of the project now. This is the Big Creek Parkway Phase 2 Warsaw connection, and amount is the same.
Okay, so we just relabel from T+1 to T+2, even though it's related to the T+1 project. So, so which leads me to another question here. My last question is ramifications or expansions of described projects. And I give an example, Oxbow Road. You know, we all agree that Oxbow Road and Alpharetta Highway have to be improved, no question about it, but then seems to have some like a octopus, you know, different ramifications, the same core project that people believe on and understand, but then there seems to be somehow ramifications along this main project. So my question here is any of these projects that have been presented today have any kind of this ramification or expansion or octopus expansion that will have a negative impact on the surrounding communities, like Oxbow Road project?
So, yeah, just to clearly explain staff's perspective on that, staff's position. So Oxbow project was well into works before the T++ conversations ever started. And the scope of the project was what it is today, even before the T+1 conversations. And like any other project that went through its different phases of public involvement. So like you see today, we went out to the public, opened the survey up for a week, offered 2 virtual sessions, and we got 300 people attended one and 21 people attended the other one. So that's how we do public involvement. Now, for these long projects, you know, sometimes there is, you know, new folks in the community and they were not aware when the public involvement was done, how it was done years ago, but the city process stays the same, and that's what we move forward with. So the Oxbow Road project scope has not changed much from the very beginning. Even before the T+1 conversations. It's still the same.
Then it's clear that all these projects will be presented, any ramification, any octopus expansion around the main core description of the project in this line here. So everybody's really aware of the impact. There might be some negative impact if the ramification is somewhere there. Know what the public or surrounded, so we'll be very clear, so this never happen again, the misunderstanding and of having something that everybody support, but something else is in there that create problems for especially for the surrounding community, because Oxford Road is great for everybody to go through, either from Roswell to Cobb to Roswell, etc. movement, that's fine, but then there's a little portion in a project that affect directly an established community. So my point here is, it's going to be very clear about all these projects, if they're going to be any impact that some people might think positive, some people might think negative, will be clearly disclosed and explained to everybody to understand that might sound good, the line there, but then who knows how it's going to impact the surrounding community, if it's any ramification other than the key description on the project name. So that is my, so we can avoid anything in the future, any misunderstanding in the future.
Absolutely. So the good thing here is that there's, for majority of these projects, there is no plans. The description is what it is here. We've got a clean slate this time. Other than the first project, the Riverside Corridor Improvement, you already gave us some money a couple years ago, and we are about to start public involvement in that. And then Project H, which is the Big Creek Parkway Phase 2 Warsaw connection. For those two, we have some level of scope, but everything else is just a clean slate. And by the process, what we'll do is the first thing would be, to hire a consulting firm, do a survey, and then start public involvement. So the public is going to dictate what these projects are going to look like. Our cost estimates are just based off of, the length, the type of the project, based on the previous similar projects we have done. So the public is going to dictate what these projects are going to look like. And then, of course, as the council, you decide based on the public input and the concepts that will eventually be brought forward to you, at committee meetings, at work sessions. So between the public and the council, you decide.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So I think some great conversation. So I think ultimately one clear fact is we need to transmit a list. So if we don't put a list forward, then ultimately, if the voters decide they do want T-Splost, then just Roswell will not be included. So that's number one. Number two, I think the liaison over transportation did a really good job of really looking at this and ensuring that it's really improving many different parts of the city. So there's many parts of the city that are improved. There's great increase in implementation of the bike ped master plan. There's doing something that I think the city needs to be doing more, which is improving infrastructure when there's new things going on. For example, we have the express lanes from GDOT. We've got new school. We've got large businesses. We've got a lot of things that I feel this is taken into account to help residents. So I think clearly all seven of us would love to add some additional projects to Tier 1, clearly. But we have the constraints of the amount. But that being said, there is Tier 2, which I also think the liaison did a good job of setting that up. So ultimately, this is something that I will be supporting for this list and moving this forward. And I will say to Councilman Zapata's legitimate concerns, if we look to what we've learned from Oxbow, I think we've learned a lot, and I'll mention one of the things added is that most likely, I guess, after the T-Splost vote, at some point, the octopus leg of doing a cut through was added at some point, is my understanding. I'm not sure if that was before or after how that worked, but it clearly didn't get enough scrutiny, et cetera. But I think this council, I'm very confident, is going to look at things closer. And in reality, as I look at this, each one looks pretty self-explanatory to me within the proposed scope. So if at any time RDOT or a consultant's recommending on adding a piece, I'll definitely be strongly voicing that we should be really making sure to do our homework on any additions to the proposed scope. But ultimately, I think this is a list we should move forward with to make sure if T-Splosh does pass, that Roswell gets its share.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. I just would like to suggest if there's a way to put a high-level timeline around some of these projects. For example, the Pine Grove Road corridor. Folks that have been involved in the input are aware that this is on the list, and perception may be that we're going to have golf cart paths next week or next year. So I would just like to set some realistic expectations. I think it would be very fair for everybody involved to say this project, if it's part of T-Splosh, probably wouldn't break ground until 2023 and be completed in 2025, or whatever the years are around any of these, so that people so that expectations are clear for the residents and staff and everybody involved, if there's a way to do that.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Tyser.
If everybody's ready, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Yes, sir.
I have a question.
You have another question?
Yeah, please. So back to the Big Creek Parkway Warsaw connection on the age. In their age. So that Big Creek Parkway Warsaw connection was ever part of the T-Splosh 1?
Yes, if you remember the original alignment of the Big Creek Parkway, took the project all the way to Warsaw at a different alignment. But when the city council made the decision to realign, staff's recommendation was to bring it up to Holcomb Bridge, to the intersection of Holcomb Bridge and Old Holcomb Bridge. And at that committee meeting, the council's direction was to extend that connection all the way to Warsaw at a different alignment this time. So it was not included in our cost estimates. At that time, now we're talking maybe 18 months ago, as part of the realignment conversations, we set a very rough estimate for Warsaw connection was $5 million. But at March committee meeting a couple months ago, we shared the Big Creek Parkway Phase 2 project concept with you before going out to public. And at that committee meeting back in March, 2 months ago, I remember, and we verified from the video, that we shared on the slide the total cost of the project as $45 to $48 million. And I mentioned at that meeting that after doing some more work, the estimated cost of Warsaw as of a couple months ago was $8 million. So we need this additional $5 million. Based on what we know today, these estimates change as we finalize the design, as we find more information, do more surveys, get more permits. These cost estimates have to be revised and updated. And they don't necessarily go up all the time. Sometimes they could go down as well. But based on what we know today, this additional $5 million would get us the Big Creek Parkway Phase 2 all the way to Warsaw.
So the original project did not contemplate any Warsaw connection?
It did. It went all the way to Warsaw, but at a different alignment.
Correct.
The alignment that's really the only option now, it's just a little bit more. So based on the rest of the alignment of the project, there were some wetlands that were impacted, and there were going to be a lot of bridges, which were going to come at a much higher cost. But the Warsaw connection, as part of the original alignment, was not as expensive and as hard as this one.
Okay.
So it's just a give and take between the two alignments, and of course those decisions were made 18 months ago.
No, great point, because I understood it was a big saving by doing the new alignment with Warsaw. So now I see that was cheaper, but now we need more money. So this is the part that, you know, it's hard to understand. If it was cheaper, this option, so where the money from the old Warsaw connection went, or, you know, why do you need more money if it's cheaper? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to understand here.
Yeah, it was cheaper and we were able to save money to partner with GDOT because 18 months ago, staff's recommendation was to end the project at Holcomb Bridge. Council decided to add the connection all the way to Warsaw. So that's additional money that was not part of the savings. And I think the presentations made at the time were as clear as they could possibly be. And I'm just basically repeating the information from 18 months ago. So that's the difference.
Mayor Henry.
I would also like to point out that during the reiterations of the project scope, we also dedicated funding to GDOT for Holcomb Bridge. That's a huge, huge dollar amount that we have committed to. So part of what we had in savings, we shifted over to reconstruct Holcomb Bridge. And I think it's really important that we remember that when we're talking about cost savings and increases.
Councilmember Tyser.
Finish up, please.
So, okay, so what the Holcomb Bridge project, part of TS Plot 1, we can move money from Big Creek Park project, TS Plot 1 to Holcomb Bridge, I mean, was also part of TS Plot 1, just to be consistent with the intent of the people when voted for TS Plot 1 projects. Was this part of this too?
Yes, so the city council was able to do that only because, yes, Holcomb Bridge interchange was a T-Splost 1 project. It didn't show as much money at the beginning, but the council made the decision to move more money into that T-Splost 1 project to make the, and the money we had in T-Splost 1 for the interchange was just to do concept and design. But I think that was a pretty smart call on the city's end to partner with GDOT with some more money and get the whole interchange rebuilt. That's a big deal and a huge improvement for the city, and I'm glad that the city did that.
Councilmember Tyser.
Thank you. So with that discussion, let me make the following motion that we accept and move forward to council meeting the 16 items into tier 1. Just to be clear, it's the items on your chart, less the State Route 140 median islands, which we've already approved in the 2021 budget, moving the Jones Bridge Road replacement to tier 3, and moving the Hogwallow Trail or similar creekway to tier 2. And then just to continue with that, if you'll go to your T-Splosh 2-3 chart, thank you. The 3.877 now includes the Hogwallow or similar creekway. Bridge replacement 3.5 will take care of, that'll move down to tier 3. And 3.5 of intersection improvements will move up to tier 2.
Thank you. So I have a motion for the approval to move this forward based on those items that was just presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Palermo. All in favor, raise your hand. I'm sorry, wait, I might have
One quick
more
question.
thing.
There's 17 items, but I think we've clearly identified them. So-
Yes, 16 projects and 17 items.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So all in favor of that motion, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you all so much for your homework and for your efforts. And we needed this, so we appreciate it. I know staff really appreciates it very much too. Thank you for what you did. I'm going to move on now to item number 11, which goes along with item number 10. So, Mr. Roth, I'll turn that back over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fisher. Really quickly, so we need, we've been working on this list to become part of this IGA. So so this 16 plus 1 project list, plus 1 item project list would become part of this IGA with Fulton County and 13 cities. We don't have the IGA from Fulton County yet, but they expect it, they expect to approve it at a special call mayor's meeting on or before July 2nd. So we need to get through the committee, and hopefully by the time it gets to the city council on June 14th, we'll have the copy. We provided you the copy of the IGA from 2016 as a reference. It's not going to look much different than that, just some main pieces. Still talking about 3/4 of a penny sales tax that would get collected. If passes in November, it will get collected from April 1, 2022 to March 31st, 2027. And the revenue gets distributed back to the cities based on their population. So Fulton County is expecting a total of $554 million over 5 years, and based on the population, Roswell is 15.8% of the population of Fulton County minus the city of Atlanta. So Roswell's 100% share, if collected, would be $86.3 million. And then 85% of that is what is supposed to be the Tier 1 projects. So that number is $73.3 million. You just saw that number as part of the previous item. If you get up all the way to 100% collection, that gets us another $12.9 million in Tier 2. And if we are lucky, collections go up to 115%, that would be the Tier 3. And we expect another $12.9 million out of that. So again, the next steps, hopefully at June 14 council meeting, we'll get the list approved and the IGA approved, and then that becomes, that gets an approval at an all mayors county meeting on or before July 2nd. So staff is recommending an approval to move forward the IGA to June 14th.
We have a motion to move this item forward for approval. Councilmember
Motion to move
Tyser.
forward.
I have a motion by Councilmember Tyser to move this forward. Do I have a second? Second, Councilmember Judy. I think I heard that one first, or the loudest anyway. I'm not sure which, but the second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll move back to item number 5. Consideration to accept right-of-way needed to complete the Woodstock Road sidewalk project in the amount not to exceed $20,500. Mr. Del Ross.
Dave, can you flip item number 5?
Kind of got everybody jumping around a little bit here.
Good morning once again. I'll try to get through as many items as we can. I know we have several people who need to leave quickly. Item number 5, this is a good news story. This is the right-of-way agreement we need to construct the last sidewalk gap on Woodstock Road, believe it or not. Based on this map you see on the right, green is existing sidewalk, yellow is the gap we are trying to fill. With this construction, we will have a consistent sidewalk from Woodstock, from Canton to 92. This contract we're asking you to approve is the right-of-way we need to fill that gap. There is one parcel owner. We have 160 feet of 5-foot sidewalk. This sidewalk ranks very high on your sidewalk priority list. With this approval, we would obviously bring it to council, and we would be under construction on this gap this summer. This will happen very quickly. One variable for you that you're probably thinking about already and ready to ask me a question. Yes, this is on the T-SPLOS list that you just considered and is moving forward as well. So from staff's perspective, looking at Woodstock, the location and the side of the road that the multi-use trail will be on, if the funding passes in November, that decision hasn't been made yet. There are impacts along both sides of Woodstock. This multi-use trail will impact trees, will be building walls, will be impacting properties regardless of what side of the street we are on. The hub and spoke map recommends the right side. We have 2 currently in design projects, the left turn lane for Crabapple Middle School, the new school, and the right turn lane on Woodstock approaching 92 that are both in design that both assume that the trail will be on the right side of the road. If council at a future date decides the best path forward is to construct the multi-use trail on the left side of the road, or there is a concept approved at some point to create a crossing at some point along. Hypothetically, we could do half of it on the right, half of it on the left. If that were to happen on this specific segment, all we would do is we would put concrete in the grass strip that we are envisioning. So on this gap, I don't have a picture of this. On this gap, we would be, if in your head you can picture a 2-foot grass strip with a 6-foot sidewalk with a wall behind it. If that ended up being a multi-use trail segment, in a future decision, we would have a 8-foot trail at the back of curb. We would not need to reconstruct the wall. We would not need to acquire more right-of-way from the parcel. All we would have is a relatively small amount. We're estimating $50,000 of utility relocation associated with that, removing the grass strip. So given the priority on the matrix, given that we can accommodate the multi-use trail in the future, staff would recommend going ahead and finishing this right-of-way, finishing this gap. And if the multi-use trail ends up on the left, that's a process we can work forward through in the future.
Any questions for Mr. DeRoss? Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. So just as we had discussed on hardscrabble, when the plan was for it to be on one side towards Target, and then staff came forward with the recommendation on the other because of, frankly, the cost, which I think is smart and which I want to see more of from staff on just how can we save money anytime. What I'm looking at as we fill in as many sidewalk gaps as possible, as well as we implement the bike ped master plan of connecting our different spokes. I want to see it done as cheaply as possible. And so that's where, for me, it's less important exactly what side a multi-use trail is on, but if we can save $1 million, I want to make sure we do that. With this, interestingly enough, with this example, there's already the middle school, which has the multi-use trail. There's Vickers, which has the multi-use trail. There's a house that was approved that's going to have a multi-use trail. And so I appreciate you already thinking about that and looking at saving money. Is it possible to move this forward and in the same vote, just basically give staff the authority, if needed, to do the sidewalk, do the pavement instead of the 2-foot grass strip, so that way you just have the authority to do that later? Is that something that's possible?
If the direction from council is to go ahead and construct it as a multi-use trail, go ahead and skip a step and construct 8 feet instead of 6 feet. All we would be doing is adding construction costs to this job. So we would be spending an additional, we have not started formal utility relocation plans with Georgia Power yet, but we're estimating that as a couple of poles, roughly $50,000 that would come out of sidewalk connectivity today versus having that option a year from now.
Because again, my thought process is I want to save as much money during T-Splost on Tier 1 to get to Tier 2 projects as quickly as possible. So that's part of my thought process. And also, as you're aware, there is a city policy I disagree with, which is I like, again, my goal is cost savings and therefore getting to use that cost savings to spread more paths and more sidewalks elsewhere. I prefer the idea of being able to just add 2 feet of sidewalk in different places instead of having to rip one up and put one back down. And so knowing that that's a policy, even if I disagree with it, my preference is we build it the first time and therefore save the money to have to kind of try to correct it later. So that's my thought process as well.
If that's the direction from council, this right-of-way agreement would not change. We would still like to bring this forward to June 14th. There would be a small amount of schedule delay for us to finish that utility relocation negotiation with Georgia Power. That could result in a utility agreement that we would need before you. I'm ballparking it as a couple of months of schedule delay and an additional cost out of sidewalk connectivity to construct the additional 2 feet.
And I appreciate all that. And again, my thing is wanting to make sure we do it right the first time and not having to change and go back later on with additional costs and things like that. So that would be my preference. Certainly curious to hear the committee's reaction to that.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. DeRoss? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Tyser.
Motion to move this forward to the next council meeting.
I have a motion and a second to move this forward at the 6 foot or the 8 foot or just the right of way at this point.
My understanding was you didn't need to know that to get this agreement together. My preference is that you build it the way we're gonna, the 8-foot's fine with me, but I don't think you need that from us right now.
I just want to be sure if we do the,
I would just, I would just suggest, because this is not the only sidewalk project out of the sidewalk matrix that we are working on. This is one, Old Alabama Road is one, and Hardscrabble between King and 92 is one, and there is not enough money to construct all three. So we are short on money, and you did not approve any money in the sidewalk matrix for the upcoming fiscal year, other than the $260,000 for smaller gaps
Well,
further down.
so the 260 is smaller gaps. My thing is, I agree with Councilman Tizer. Bottom line is, I think it makes sense, let's build it right, let's build it now, we've got extra money there. But either way, it looks to me all you're asking for is a right-of-way agreement.
it is.
which-
I just
yeah.
checked that too. Councilmember Tyson, you are correct. They just need the right-of-way easement. So we have a motion by Councilmember Tyson, a second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Sorry for the confusion.
We'll clarify that during the write-up for the council meeting.
Item number 7 is consideration to award a resurfacing service contract to Bartow Paving Company, Inc., bid 21109J.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. This is a great news story. We have a great contractor ready to resurface roads this summer and the fall. This is by far the largest amount of resurfacing we've ever done for the city. And believe it or not, we have an option to do more. So the bid received, we received 5 bids in April. The low bid is Bartow. They are a reputable, well-known paving contractor that does a lot of work around the state. Their bid, based on the list that you've approved previously, is $6.7 million. That was significantly below estimates by about 10 to 20% that we were expecting bids to come in at. So the decision before you today is whether you want to take advantage of very good prices and add roads, additional roads that we would be resurfacing this summer and the fall. The map currently on the screen, everything shown to you in blue is what you have approved for resurfacing over the past 6 months. This includes the state LMIG allotment. This includes the $5 million from CERTA. This is our original plan per your direction of what we would be doing this year. The list you see on the right is what we would like to add to it that would still be able to resurface, given available funding. The map associated with that list is the red you see on the screen currently. We recommend moving this forward to June 14th, and we recommend taking advantage of great prices and adding the map seen in red to the map seen in blue.
Any questions for Mr. Del Ross? Do we have a motion for this recommendation?
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Tyson. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor of moving these roads forward, raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. All right, item number 8 is consideration for the mayor and or city administrator to authorize the execution of a task order in the amount not to exceed $167,400 with city's on-call consultant, Vanis Hangen, VHB, for the design of the Old Alabama Road Multi-Use Trail Project.
Thank you, Michael. You will remember, you've seen this item before. This was brought to you in February. Your guidance to us was a pretty wide support for building this gap, but you asked us to do a small amount of public involvement. We're going to update you on what's happened since February. I'm not going to read what's on the screen. You asked us to reach out to the residents. We did, using a geographically based contact through Nextdoor, along with signs we placed in the park and contact with Rambo. Here's a picture of what we did in the field. The signs that you see in the next slide are what was installed out there, looking for feedback. This is a description of what we did, showing the limits of the proposed project in red, green, and blue on the map, along with a description of what we proposed and a website for residents to either leave us feedback or to let the city know that they would like to sign up for future information regarding this project. Map shown on the screen in yellow. This is the based on the Nextdoor algorithms for the kind of the node we placed at Big Creek Park. They contacted the neighborhoods shown in yellow approximately 30. That resulted in approximately 2,400 notifications to residents that use Nextdoor in the areas shown in yellow. You've seen this map before. This is the currently proposed sidewalk. We are asking to spend design money to design the red, green, and blue sections from the park entrance driveway to Wooten Road. Here's a rendering we showed on the website. If you had gone to the website from the signs showing you basically what the current proposal is, we are asking to design and build the sidewalk along the right-of-way of the road with maybe or maybe not a handrail based on standards for the elevation difference, but a wall would be constructed behind the sidewalk to remove and reduce grading impacts and tree impacts into the park. So yes, there will be tree impacts, a loss along the existing shoulder of Old Alabama. In discussions with Recreation and Parks, Rusty Pruitt and Taylor Smith met with us in the field. Their stance on this is that the tree loss in immediately adjacent to the road, and as we get closer to the Big Creek Parkway driveway, these were relatively small trees. This is something that they would not consider as a major impact. This is something that once this sidewalk is done, would give us the opportunity to look at future tree funds to potentially replant behind the wall before the existing trails in the park are already currently at. Comments received from the public. We received approximately 30 plus comments from residents, not with formal comments, but just asking to be added to the city's newsletter. I did not incorporate those into here, but 3 written comments were received. Comment 3 was again a request to be updated in the future. Comments 1 and 2 were basically the same. We had comments asking to, instead of building the trail up against closer to the road, they asked to build the trail close to where the existing trail in the woods is currently. Staff looked at that. Staff discussed that option with Rec and Parks in the field several months ago. Our joint opinion is, given the use of those trails with mountain bikers, given the potential and the requirement that when we build this, it would be concrete, given the potential loss of significantly more trees within the park itself to construct the trail and to work through design elements such as how do we guide the users of the facility to where the paved walking trail is versus the mountain biking trail, given, again, the potential loss of trees within the park, given the potential for, normally when we do sidewalks and trails, we need to consider lighting, and the more further away from the road you get it, you may need to look at some level of pedestrian lighting. Given the hours of the park currently operating, staff recommendation is to proceed with the original proposal to build something similar to what's shown on the screen in these 2 renderings that were shared with the public. So we are asking to move forward with the design. If this is approved, we would be hiring one of our on-call design firms to begin design of this project. To finish Mohammed's comment from what he just said 5 minutes ago, sidewalk connectivity funding status. So you're familiar with the Woodstock segment we just talked about. You're familiar with the segment on hardscrabble that is currently in design, and you're familiar with this one. We have available funding to design and construct everything currently in the pipeline with the exception of this project. So we would be able to build Woodstock, we will be able to build hardscrabble, we'll be able to design hardscrabble, we will be able to design this. This would be put on the shelf in 4 to 6 months later this year, waiting for future available funding.
Any other questions for Mr. Del Ross? Councilmember Zapata.
Thank you. So if we can go back to the recommendation from the public input, I think that, number 1 totally makes sense and is a big improvement to the look and feel of the multi-use trail, given that Old Alabama Road is a highly traffic road. So I think that having more of a, more out of road experience for the trail, I think this is a really big value added to the project. So I strongly support the comment number 1. I think that on the long run, we will see the benefits of that, not having to walk or push the strollers right next to the highly traffic road. It's a totally different experience walking by a highly traffic road versus walking through more of a park feeling. I think that, we're going to regret in the future spending all this money and then having the experience of just walking in a wide sidewalk right next to All Alabama Road. So I don't know if this item will contemplate whoever's going to design to have 2 options for council to decide which of the 2 options could be the most value added to the community. So, before supporting this, I need to know if they will come because it's 2 different options. Here we're two totally different options. So I would like to see the 2 options to decide which one is overall the best decision for the community.
Councilmember Tytzer.
Thank you. I had an opportunity to talk to a few members, residents who live right in that area. And their opinion, their concern was that we design it this way, the way you've recommended. The trees that are in the way of this design are mostly scrub and things that they didn't seem to think would be a problem. The folks I talked to travel this way pretty much, continuously, some every day. Their comment was that if you go into the alternate design, then you are taking out some significant tree growth, and they were pretty adamant for the option that they're recommending here. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Thank you, Councilmember Judy.
Yes, and also we should think about safety. A lot of people, we've heard it over here, people walking through the trees down a lighted path here to, at night walking through, unless we're going to light the path through the trees there, people might not be wanting to walk through trees in the middle of the evening. So I think safety also needs to be, because we've heard it over here, considered.
Thank you. We have a motion for this item.
So the motion will be to bring the design exactly like you show us here, or will be options to evaluate in terms of safety, in terms of trees, in terms of future night and feel of walking through the most peaceful trail, or what will be the motion? And
I don't have one yet.
Can I speak to that 1 second? The price you see on the screen, the scope that we have negotiated with our engineer for $167,400 that we are bringing forward to you, would proceed with the pictures shown on the screen. If council wants to investigate additional concepts, that would require additional funding.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to move forward with the design with one addition, that you don't design another version, but bring us back some ideas as to whether they can be done, the cost and the possible pluses and minuses with it. So perhaps what you can do is get started with this, and then maybe by the council meeting, you can bring us, is there a potential option? Is it a good option or a bad option? I'm trying to recognize Council Member Zapata's concern, so let me fix it. I got it. Okay. Here's the motion. Motion to approve, and I would ask that you bring with you the possibility of another option, pluses and minuses.
We can do that.
So you've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Judy. All in favor of that motion, raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you very much.
Might be able to get through this. I think the last.
Item number 9 is the last one, consideration to partner with North Fulton CID on a raised grant application for the Old Ellis Extension Project.
We've discussed federal, thank you, Michael. We've discussed federal funding a lot lately over the past 3 months. This is an opportunity. Back in April, the USDOT published a notice of funding opportunity that we began discussions with the North Fulton CID for the Old Ellis Extension Project. You're familiar with Old Ellis. It is currently a dead end, serving primarily industrial uses with some residential near the corner of Old Roswell. We envisioned extending that road to connect with the constructed Sun Valley Drive. It is relatively expensive for the length, given the large bridge that will need to be constructed over Folk Killer Creek. Raised grants, you're familiar with, you've probably heard with Tiger grants and you've heard with Build grants. This is the very, very similar system. Typically new administrations in the White House rename grants, and that's what happened here. There are some additional criteria you see on the screen given different decision makers in those positions. I'm not going to read what's currently on the screen. Basically, what's before you is staff is looking for guidance whether this is something you want us to continue working forward with on the North Fulton CID. This grant is very labor intensive. There is a very difficult benefit cost analysis that neither of us, as city staff or the CID, has the capability to perform. In the past, when we have pursued a grant like this on another project, we hired a consultant to complete that effort. The North Fulton CID is proposing to lead the grant, is proposing to apply for the grant. They are asking for a 50-50 partnership on the application, the pursuit. So that would be $37,500. If this is something you want to move forward with, I will be bringing a memorandum of understanding between the city and the CID next month to committee to formally establish some of the funding assumptions within the grant that we would need to show in order for it to be strongly approved, such as engineering responsibilities. Many of you know that to enable yourself to use state and federal funding, it lengthens significantly the engineering phase and requirements that the CID is proposing to be responsible for. There is an assumption for that. There is an assumption for right-of-way funding that the RAISE grant would pay a portion of, that Roswell would be responsible for the rest. That is included in your T-SPLOST project list. And there is a construction assumption given that the RAISE grant will be paying for construction. So if this is approved, we would bring the budget amendment for the $37,500 to council, and you would see the follow-up to this at June committee. Just quick note, the North Fulton CID would also be addressing the MOU at their July board meeting in order for us to finish this before the July 12th deadline.
Any questions for Mr. Del Ross? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Tyson.
Yeah, so this is an important project for the city, and I think you've put it together very well, so motion to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Tyson. I heard a second from Councilmember Palermo. All in favor, raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you. We're adjourned. Lot done today. Thank you all for that.